Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the sort of options available to someone like Dominic Raab, resigning in both disgrace and defiance. In theory, has a route back to the top of government, even before too long, but he's not behaving like it. So what does someone in Raab's position do now? But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So this is quite a good case study, really, because politicians, when they sort of come to the end of a road for various reasons, it's a tricky thing to work out what they need to do next, particularly when they've been at the top of government, and particularly if they're not the sort of person that has an easy route into well-paid work, to keep them in the style to which they're accustomed. And when I was discussing Raab's resignation yesterday, it was all very much breaking news. We'll discuss more about it in the stream this evening, perhaps. But it's clear from both his resignation letter, as well as the graceless article he wrote for the Daily Telegraph, and I suppose his general whining ever since, he does not accept that he needed to resign. He sort of felt that he had to do it rather. He jumped before he was pushed. Like a spoilt brat, he's blaming everyone and anyone. Coordinated with much of the far-right commentariat, he's blaming a small number of civil servants for ousting him. Unionised civil servants, he called them, others have called them Labour civil servants, seemingly oblivious to the fact that he had dozens of complaints made against him, and an experienced lawyer chosen by his political friend Rishi Sunak also found that he had broken the rules. In theory, he has a route back into government. These sorts of resignations do happen, even under vaguely sensible governments, although it's usually for dodgy financial dealings rather than abusing your own staff. But for major players in the party, you resign, you apologise, you spend a suitable period of time contemplating, then you're back in government at the next reshuffle. Might be 6 months later. But you are supposed to show a bit of contrition. You're supposed to go, yeah, okay, shouldn't have done that. A bit silly. I've learnt my lesson. Whether they have is another matter, but you at least need to demonstrate you've learnt your lesson. Raab doesn't think he has any lessons to learn. So even feigned contrition doesn't seem to be part of his plan. Maybe he's genuinely too dim to understand how to play the game. Maybe he just hasn't seen anyone else play it for him to learn from. Since Raab has been at the top of government, he's seen no end of colleagues commit breaches of the ministerial code and really suffer no consequences. In fact, Priti Patel was even found guilty of bullying after a formal investigation, and still nothing happened. I suppose in some ways anyone could feel aggrieved if they're punished for something that someone else got away with, let alone someone with Raab's level of conceit. Talking about Priti Patel, she might actually be the last person who was ever basically sacked from government under normal circumstances. When she was in Theresa May's government, she basically almost committed treason. She was talking to foreign powers behind the Prime Minister's back. So that was it. She was out of government. She may be the last time anyone sort of had to do that. Certainly since Boris Johnson's been in charge, when ministers have had to go, it's been under the most intense pressure. There's never been scandal break, minister resigns same day. That's never happened, has it? For years. But anyway, the circumstances now are very different to those last few years. Being seen to let your mates off is now incredibly toxic to the Conservatives' reputation. Ever since Owen Paterson, really, the public have got no time for it. And Raab maybe doesn't understand this. If Raab wants to get back into government, he would have done better to express his apologies. He could still have claimed that he didn't really realise he was doing anything wrong if he wanted. Express his apologies. Resolve to learn from the experience. Because I've now read the full report. In the report, not only does it sort of say that, okay, yes, there's these cases where it's not proven, but there's other cases where it's absolutely proven. But one of the things that comes out of the report quite strongly is that Raab simply doesn't even know how to treat people. He actually doesn't understand how to treat people. So he could have gone off, resolved to learn from the experience, and at least give the impression of becoming a better person, a better manager and a better politician. But perhaps he thinks there's no point. By the time he could reasonably come back, there would be no time to do anything before the election. Like his plan to remove our human rights and replace it with his so-called Bill of Rights, that will likely be dead in the water, I would think. I don't think his successor's going to want to bother with it. It might be different if the Conservatives had a chance at the next election, because then he could just think of this as a setback. But despite the pretense of optimism in the Tory media, few are giving them very much chance. But if the Conservatives did stand a chance, Raab's main challenge right now would be to make sure he remained an MP. Because when Raab first won, first entered Parliament in 2010, his constituency of Esher and Walton was a safe Tory seat. Now the Liberal Democrats are not just seriously targeting it, but actually expect to win it. If Raab wants to rekindle any sort of parliamentary career, he ought to concentrate on winning that seat. Now, it won't be easy. In fact, it might be almost impossible, because it's not just that the Conservatives are suffering in the polls now. Groups of voters don't remain static in some areas. So this will affect other Conservatives as well. Demographics do change. We've seen the demographics change in some former Labour strongholds. As young people in old, knackered industrial towns in the north leave for better jobs in the city because their own community doesn't really have the jobs to supply to them. So what remains behind are the people who are traditionally more inclined to vote for the Conservatives. And therefore, the Conservatives naturally then start to be able to win seats that were previously impossible. Nothing to do with the various political leaders in play, just the natural change of populations. But the same thing is happening in home counties as well. So as London becomes increasingly expensive, and even immediately around London becomes too expensive, more people working in and around the capital are having to live further out and commute in. Now that has moved significant numbers of people who are more likely to vote Labour or the Liberal Democrats into formerly safe Conservative seats. So ironically, the decisions of Conservative governments to prevent the building of affordable housing is biting them on the arse in parts of the Blue Wall. You couple that with the fact that the Conservatives' reputation right now is being shot to pieces after 13 years of the most reckless and spiteful government. There are some seats which used to be safe. So safe that you could put a blue rosette on a donkey or even Dominic Raab and expect to win comfortably. Now they're in real danger. So really, Raab's got a choice. He can whinge and whine all he likes, but if he wants to think about his immediate future, he's got a choice. Does he want to continue his political career? If he does, his first step is to focus on his own constituency. Yes, he could lose it and then pop up for a safe by-election later on, possibly. But there might be some other big names after those as well. It could be a bit of a scrap. If he does claw his way back into Parliament or somehow retain his seat at the next election, which looks very unlikely, he'll still find himself on the opposition benches. Politics obviously very uncertain, but there's every chance Labour could be in power for a decade or more. I would hope over a decade anyway. As an aside, I am hoping that proportional representation comes into the equation, which would sideline gimps like Raab, even if the Tories did start to return to credibility. Because I get the impression, I think the Tories may well do what the Republicans have done in America after losing. Instead of thinking, right, where did we go wrong? It's like, no, let's double down on the crazy. Because we've seen it from Brexit. Everyone knows it's going badly. The Brexiteers say it's going badly. But why is it going badly, you say to them? They don't say, oh, because it was a stupid idea from the start. You were right after all. Sorry about that. No. It's because we didn't do it. We didn't Brexit hard enough. So they doubled down on the crazy. I think the Conservatives may do that. But you would think that by the time they start actually appealing to the public again, by the time they're sick of losing, it will be by returning to a more moderate outlook. Does such a Conservative Party have room for someone like Dominic Raab, who, bear in mind, was never likely to get anywhere near the top of government without Brexit? But whatever happens, there's every chance by then he's in his 60s. By the time he's got any chance of return to government in his 60s, no longer one of the young guns, no longer one of the up-and-comings. In fact, it has been. In order to come back to power, the Tories are likely to have to rid themselves of the people most to blame for their fall from grace. Dominic Raab is unlikely to have the staying power to avoid the internal party cull. His other option is to consider a post-political career, of course. I mean, he could return to law. He was a solicitor. You know, I can't possibly speak about how good he was as a solicitor, but I have seen enough from Raab the politician to know he's not a bright man, is he? And he's not a hard-working man. You know, let's consider he was the Brexit secretary who had to say, oh, Dover apparently is quite important to our trade. Is it? And then as foreign secretary, he had to be demoted because during the fall of Kabul, the biggest thing that happened while he was foreign secretary, the thing that needed him actually to get to work, he was laid on the beach. Laid on the beach. He's not a bright man. He's not a hard-working man. So is he really going to be able to go back into law and earn the money that he thinks he's worth? Like, despite Nadine Dorries saying he's clever enough to just leave politics to do something else, I'm not really sure. In fact, only someone of the calibre of Dorries could possibly consider Raab clever. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, if you read about Raab's legal career before entering Parliament, it's not very long, but it doesn't sound too bad. He's mixed it up a bit. I mean, you could read it and almost be forgiven for thinking it's got the hallmarks of a promising legal career. Really can't square that with the dullard we've seen in Parliament, who, as I say, has to admit that he basically didn't realise Britain's an island. His best bet, I suppose, would be a newspaper columnist. You know, as other Conservatives have done both before and after parliamentary careers. He could write pieces attacking woke culture or moaning about some other invented threats to our sheep-infested plague island. Wouldn't require much aptitude and almost no effort. It'd be perfect for Raab. You know, if you've got a large enough following, it's possible to earn £250,000 a year for writing as little as one article a week. The equivalent of one of the 14 videos I script each week. You know, on the right subject, by the right person, from the right angle, you can easily dine off the likes of the Daily Telegraph for years to come. And the field's never been so open for a right-wing gobshite. You know, there are the usual Tory newspapers, but you've also now got Talk TV and GBBs. They're desperate for some ratings. No one's watching them. They're struggling. They're losing money hand over fist. Whoever's behind it pumping money into it, at some point they're going to decide surely that it's not worth it. So they need to bung up the ratings. Maybe someone like Raab would be quite good. You know, a real good Rage Against the Machine type presenter for them. In fact, you know, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if he turns out to be better than their current crop. You know, who have they got at the moment, GBBs? They've got Jacob Rees-Mogg. OK, he talks a load of crap, but he's got no energy. You sort of feel that someone must be prodding him with a stick every so often to make sure he hasn't fallen into a coma. Nadine Dorries is as thick as mince, even by Raab's standards. And she shows herself up even when talking to people who are on her side. There is no trap obvious enough that she will not walk into it. Lee Anderson doesn't actually come across as someone who is genuinely angry. He plays the part. I think he might have been once. But since he became an MP, he's living the life of Riley. And I think he knows it. His salary basically trebled overnight. Gets expenses paid, people treating him like he's important. And his GBB salary is now more than doubled that trebled salary as well. Anderson strikes me as the classic embittered working class racist kicking down because they can't cope with their crap life. But his life isn't crap anymore, is it? Being paid a fortune to play the part. That's what I think. I don't think he's really embittered now. I think he's loving it. You know, so like anyone who has seen a huge increase in their income in a very short time, especially someone who was on a low income before, it's hard to be mad at the world when life's that good. But Raab is genuinely angry. He has such a high opinion of himself and a low opinion of everyone else that nothing's good enough. You know, very much like Boris Johnson himself. You know, any marketer will know that when it comes to divisive debates, ranting is what really pulls in the punters. Proper ranting, really frothing at the mouth, red-faced rage to get the clicks. Nigel Farage is quite good at that. Maybe Raab could be. Maybe he's missing his calling at the moment. It's because it is hard to say because he hasn't really tried. You know, perhaps he could get, maybe he could go and get himself a gig somewhere to work on his patter. Maybe go to Northern Ireland, do a training course with one of the more uncompromising political figures there. Or maybe he'll write a book, how everyone is soft and stupid except me. But there we are, interesting. Be interested to see his options. There we are, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships, and until next time, I'll see you later.